not giving you any ideas.
I bet we will.
I
anyway.
vote against. Let's go to Bruce instead.
Yeah.
That's what we did last time.
I know.
I know.
That was great.
We could do it.
That was
Could happen.
lovely.
Speak of the devil. Oh, look who's here, just in time.
Yay, you made it.
Okay, we're good.
Sorry to hold y'all up.
Oh, no, that wasn't
It's
it.
weird sitting in another
It's just
spot.
that
I'm like,
we know
Oh,
three people aren't gonna be here.
Or, okay, yeah.
Can't wait for the
glad you
new
showed up.
city hall and the new microphone. Right.
Yeah.
I will now call to order the study session meeting of July 15th, 2024. Members of the public are invited to attend in-person meetings in council chambers. Public access to tonight's meeting is also available on the Local Government Access Channel 8 for Comcast subscribers, on the city's YouTube channel online, and by telephone using the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Leidy will be absent. Mayor Pro Tem Luke Manjero Massa.
Here.
Councilmember Burns.
Here.
Councilmember Jaramillo will be absent. Councilmember Kondo.
Here.
Councilmember Roper.
Here.
Councilmember Goff.
Here.
Councilmember Nowicki will be absent. Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Great, we have 3 study session items, and the first one is the North Glen Marketplace update from Hutensky Capital Partners. We have the CEO of Hutensky Capital Partners and President of the Hutensky Group, that's a lot of words, Brad Hutensky, will present the update to council. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to say a few words and I have a couple slides, but really I want this to be more discussion and opportunity for you and anyone else to, ask what you want of me while I'm here. I guess I'd start off by just telling you a little bit of, some of you don't know me. I've been to NURA a number of times, a number of meetings, but perhaps the council, I think only once before. So our company, Hutensky Capital Partners, does shopping centers nationwide. We've founded in 1979, about over 170 shopping centers, 29 million square feet in 29 states. I'm the CEO and president, as you said. I've been in the shopping center business 40 years. I started when I was 14 mowing lawns and picking up garbage at shopping centers and cutting weeds. And they gave me the title Director of Environmental Control
Nice.
at 14. So it's been in my blood for a long time. I was chairman of International Council of Shopping Centers, which is at the time was a 70,000 person trade group, an international of all shopping centers, and also Urban Land Institute. So I guess the point, I don't like talking about myself, but is that I've been doing this for a long time, and this is a profession. So a little bit about, I guess, just a little context for the discussion. First of all, I've done business in a lot of places, and I would say that North Glen is the best place I've ever done business. Nora has been an incredible partner. Rosie and her group have been wonderful to deal with. I think they've pushed me to be better, but they've also it's been a partnership, and they've been flexible, and I really appreciate that. Heather has been great, along the way, guidance, telling me what to do, what not to do. And she's been terrific. Brooke, as town planner is amazing. He really has a lot of insight. He's been incredibly helpful. Debbie and then Allison have been great as far as leading me and helping me what to do, and so many other people. So it's really, you should be very happy about the place where you work, because it's a pretty amazing place as far as helping and working with someone in my profession to try to make that property the best it can be. I know how important this property is to the community. Before I even bought it, I was told that by so many people, and I really do appreciate that. And I know, every one of you, in addition to your position in the government, is also probably a shopper there, or knows people are shoppers there, or shop there forever kind of thing. And so everyone has an opinion, I'm sure, individually as well as professionally, and I'm here to hear that. Since this is a public meeting, there's certain things I won't say, for instance, like prospective tenants that we're working with, because another shopping center could steal them away from me. And I guess if you ask something that I can't talk about, I'll tell you that, and I hope you understand. Obviously, North Glen's a key constituent here, but I have other constituents. I have investors, I have lenders, I have the tenants who are there, and those are all important to me. And, so I have to balance all of those things. I can't just do what the city wants. I'd like to do everything the city wants, but I also have to do what those other constituents want. So just in the way of history, this is what happened when I bought the property in September of 2017. It was in foreclosure. Spent just less than $50 million to buy it from a lender who was basically auctioning it, and I decided it made sense. I won't get into the transaction, it was very difficult, but the center was 40% vacant. A lot of tenants were threatening to leave. There's an OEA, an easement agreement, that's 100 pages, that was written in 1998. And it dictates what I can do, and I can't change that OEA without the city's approval, without a lot of tenants' approval, with a lot of other things. And it's, for instance, I was talking today to the leasing people, there's only one place in that center that I can do fitness, which is the old Sports Authority or Bed Bath & Beyond space. So if I got the greatest gym that wanted to go someplace else, I would have to get approvals from a lot of the tenants and the OEA and the city, because I'd have to amend those agreements. So there's very difficult things. There's no new construction allowed there. No, can't change the facades, can't change the parking lot, can't change anything. So every time I do something that does one of those things, I basically have to go to all the tenants and all the other stakeholders and get approval to do it. So it really is difficult. And I'll talk more about that in a second. At the time, there were 3 voters for the OEA. So it was Lowe's, because they own their parcel, the shopping center owner, and then the owner of the old Mervyn's building was an out-of-state person. And frankly, they were using that to force the owners of the shopping center to pay them money every time they wanted to do something. So that was a real problem. Lots of deferred maintenance, the roofs, the parking lot, outdated signage that was left over from the mall. So just a brief overview of what we've done since then. We bought the Mervyn's building with NERA's help, and now we own that, so we have that vote, and we also have the shopping center vote. Now we just have Lowe's as the third owner. We've invested more than $25 million, so I have $50 million that I bought it for, another $25 million, so about $75 million invested in that property. We've upgraded the lighting, LED lighting that's more environmentally friendly and also safer, frankly. Parking lot and roof replacement and repair. $1 million of new signage that's underway now that we work with Nura as far as the design and where it goes and that kind of thing, and I'll show you in a moment, a sign where all that is. Vacancy has gone from 40% to 14% because of our leasing effort, 14 new leases, 30 renewals. During COVID, when the state shut down basically every tenant in that property, we gave $400,000 of relief to the 12 tenants there. Prost is open. You've all probably been there. It's pretty amazing. That was something that we started off the property. We had AMC theaters. We had to deal with them. And then we got uncomfortable with their credit, so we switched to Harkins. Over 2 years, I signed a lease with Harkins for 15 years to go there. COVID hit. The state said no theater could open in the state. And Harkins had financial issues because of every one of their theaters was closed in the United States. And basically, we found Prost, and we decided that Prost would be better. Even though we had a signed lease and Harkins was about to start construction, we tore up the lease with Harkins. They agreed, we agreed, and we went to Prost. It took 3 more years. I think the result is worth it. I think Prost is a lot more special than a movie theater. But, you never really know, but we thought that was it. So we invested probably $2.5 million into the Prost deal ourselves, and also sold them their land at a pretty good price to make it worth their while and all that kind of thing. So we decided that was an important thing to do for this property. I think they're going to be there for 50 years or more, and I think that'll be something that'll be a long-term thing, probably more long-term even than a theater would have been. But, that cost us a lot of money to make that change, but we think it's the right thing. So I'll just show you a couple pictures. This is just an aerial. It's kind of hard to see, but all the yellow, those things are all that's like kind of wayfinding signage in there, so make it easier for people to figure out how to move around the property. And then new big signage here. I mean, that signage was left over from the mall, so it's, really old, and we've redesigned all that, like I said, $1 million. The signs coming off the ramp right here, those green signs that, I thought were hideous. The first time I saw this, they're still there and they're still hideous, but those will all be replaced. And see, if it's my children, I can call them ugly, but if they're your children, I wouldn't dare. So, it's kind of okay, I guess. So anyhow, that's going to be a big improvement in the property. this shows you just kind of a leasing plan of the property. And this is kind of interesting. So the green are all the new leases that we did, and the yellow is all the renewals. So tenants that were there that we extended their lease. So if you look, you can't, probably hard to see from where you are, but there's pretty much, Lowe's owns their own thing, so that isn't green or yellow. Pretty much almost every single space is either green or yellow. That means we either did a new lease or we renewed an existing tenant. So that's, and I'll talk more about that in a second. Next slide you probably recognize is Prost. We think this is going to be a great anchor and something to really build upon on this end of the center. I'll talk about that in a second. Some more Prost pictures. So I guess, I realize that everyone isn't in the shopping center business like me. You may go to shopping centers, but maybe you don't necessarily, it's not your profession, I don't think. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about some of the difficulties, some of the issues that we do. First of all, we have tenant relationships. I know personally probably almost every national tenant in the country. I have a relationship with them. I know their spouses, maybe I know their kids, maybe I've slept at their house. So I can get people to come to this property and take a look. And those relationships are very important, and that's how we made a lot of the deals that we did. But we also use local brokers from here to also get the local tenants and to also help make sure that if there's someone searching the area that we know about it. So we definitely know all the players. Tenants really pick the locations based on demographics, so they look and see who is their customer, who are they trying to sell to, and what are the demographics. And the demographics here versus Orchards are dramatically different. Someone was just showing you today. This property has almost 3 times the population in 3 miles that the Orchards does. Their income is almost 2 times the income that this property has. So we have lower income, more density. They have less people, higher income. So all that's neither good nor bad. It just means that different tenants are attracted to those facts versus these facts. And that's just, demographics from the census. So when we're doing it, because we're running this as a business, we pick tenants based on the credit, the economics, how much does it cost us to put them in, what rent are they going to pay, do we think they're going to be a contribution to the mix? And I know early on in my career, I once did the greatest tenant mix that I've ever done, which is we had a Weight Watchers, and I put Baskin Robbins next to them, because I thought that they would kind of, help each other, right? And that kind of tenant mix, by putting the right tenants together, is very important, because that's what makes the center better than just any one tenant alone. Prost, like I said, took 3 years, and they a lot of it had to do with they were very careful where they chose, and they wanted to get the best deal and all that kind of thing. But it was basically a 3-year process. So these things take a really long time. And then the last thing, is the complications that go through any leasing deal that we do. So what is the cost to put that tenant in? Do we have the right location? So if someone wants 10,000 feet and we only have 5,000 feet or 20,000 feet, then they won't come to our center. They have to have the right size. We can divide spaces, we can expand spaces, but that's all expensive. So that has to be something. Do we have, some people want to be on 104th Avenue, or they don't want to be in the center. Other people, can maybe be in the back and work differently. And then there's the zoning, everything with the city, the zoning, the parking code, is the use even allowed in the center? And we have to deal with all that. And if someone, like for instance, we were doing Prost, because Joanne was a different ownership, we had to have a certain kind of firewall there, and the whole wall had to be rebuilt, and it cost a ton of money, because that was, the rule in the city. And that's okay, we'll follow all the rules, but that's just another complication that we have. Then there's all the other tenants in the property who have restrictions in their leases. Certain tenants don't allow certain other tenants in the same business to come there. So, and then the OEA, like I mentioned, is a restriction here. So you put all that stuff together, it's not like I call someone up and they move in the next day. There's a long process, and it's give and take and all that kind of thing, a lot of negotiation. But it's what we do, and we've done it well here, I think. So this just gives you a sense. And one thing is, leasing is our responsibility, okay? It's not the city's responsibility, it's not Allison, it's not anyone else. It's our responsibility. We do leasing. You can help us do leasing. You can help us with, and certainly the city has been very generous with helping specific tenants over certain things, help them through how to get approvals quicker, how to get things done. But it's our responsibility, and we bring in all the tenants, and then you help. And, Prost is something we found, and at the time Debbie Tuttle was there, and she helped us with some things and this and that, but she has limits, and basically we're the one writing all the big checks, and we're the ones dealing with all the stuff, and, that's what we do. So, like I said, 14 new leases, just pros, DDs, Five Below, Painted Tree, to name a few, 240,000 square feet. 30 leases that we renewed, 282,000. So you add those two together, 522,000 square feet, which is more than 100% of the space that we have. So we've touched every space, some of them twice or three times in the property. But 9 tenants filed bankruptcy at the same time, so Bed Bath & Beyond, Joann Fabrics, who's come back, K&G, who's stayed in the center, Route 31, Tuesday Morning, et cetera. So that's the nature of our business. It happens all the time. I think we're beyond a lot of the problems. In 2020, 45 national retail tenants filed bankruptcy and liquidated. So that's really more that happened. But there's still one or two every year who has problems. And if they happen to be in our center, then, we have to deal with that. So I guess the last thing I wanted to do is just tell you a little bit about where I think the center's headed. And then we can open it up to all your questions and comments and jokes. I love jokes, if you have jokes too, by the way. So one, obviously to lease up the space. That's how I make money, is by leasing up the space. And like I said, we've gone from 40% vacant to 14% vacant. And now we want to be 0% vacant. That's what we try to do always. And that's what we're trying to do. Finish the signage project. I think it's going to really look a lot better when the new signage is in. That should be done fall. I put year end here to be conservative, but probably by the fall. Down at the Prost end of the property, I think we want it to be a little more experiential. And some of the tenants that we're putting in, I mentioned Kids Empire, which is a child's play area, gym area down next to Office Depot. That's going to be helpful to that. We think restaurants work well there. And we will look to try to make that hopefully a little bit more walkable than it is, and just more of a, I don't know, it's like a center within a center, like a little kind of center within this big power center. It's tough to make the big power center be more walkable, but we think that part can be. And there's also the 3.5 acres down there that we can do something with, that'll also be helpful. So I actually met today with the architect who we've engaged to think about a 10-year plan for the property or longer. What would you want to do over time when leases expire and you get control of certain spaces? What could we do to think about, like I said, walkability? I mean, it's literally a quarter mile from 104th to get to Prost. It's a quarter mile because I've measured it. And that's pretty far. And so, there's this long road there, and can you do something to make that feel less long or less like it's not going down a highway kind of thing? Again, if it was just me, I could do whatever I want, but here I have the OEA saying you can't change that, tenant leases saying you can't change that. So I would have to get permission. I have to figure out what I want to do or what the idea is, and certainly talk to the city about that and all that kind of thing. But we'd come up with what we want to do, and then we have to sell it. And I think I can get it done, but it's not easy. So that's one thing we do. The 3.5 acres, what's the best use for that? Like I said, I would like to eliminate the OEA and just have one plan and get everyone to approve the plan and not have that document, because that's a real problem there. Walkability I mentioned. And then, we will engage the city, we will engage the community and get their input. What do they want out of the property? We can't please everybody, but what people want is important. And like I said, all you people are probably customers of the property too, and you have your own ideas. And we're open to that. But I think we've taken it from a center that was in total distress, was on the verge of collapse, to now it's something that's at least been stabilized. Okay, but we're not done. So I hate to use grades, but if it's a B+ now, if it was a D- when we started, is a B+ now, we want to get it to an A. We want to think about the next stage and really make it, that much better. So that's where I'm going to work towards, and that's what we're committed to do. And I guess with that, I'd love your comments, your questions, or anyone here.
Thank you. I know we are definitely going to have a lot of questions, so thank you so much for that presentation and that update. As you mentioned, it is very important to Northglenn. I would say it is the heart of Northglenn in some ways in terms of our biggest shopping center, so it's very, very important to us. I will open with one question just because it may help with some of the other questions that are possibly coming through the pipeline. But you mentioned, so I lease my own business. I'm a business owner across 5 different cities and counties. So I understand some of those components, not from the commercial owner, but from the tenant perspective. And that piece that you mentioned in terms of, let's call it a non-compete clause, or, not having like businesses that get written into leases. So what challenges do you potentially see with some of that empty space? And I'm thinking, let's just use a random example of having something like a Stanley Marketplace or a Denver Milk Market or a Freedom Social Hall that has different kinds of restaurants that may have alcohol or beer, for example. Are there restrictions? You mentioned restaurants as something that potential, but I know those are probably some of the questions we have. And I'm just wondering, like, if you can speak to what maybe some of those clauses that you have with other tenants could prevent certain types
Well,
of.
so alcohol is a city thing. I have nothing to do with that. I mean, if someone was, I guess if they were doing something the city allowed and I didn't like it, then that would be, but probably alcohol is controlled by the city, I would think, as far as what your rules are. And if you're a restaurant or you serve alcohol, you have to have certain things. I mean, so that would be the city. But, I think that, I think that the restrictions mostly have to do with uses. So for instance, if you have a certain kind of, if you have a shoe store, you might not want another shoe store there.
Right.
So that's something that, most of that stuff we inherited before we even involved in it. It was already in the leases, and we, kept the same leases. If those leases run out, then we could put something else. And most centers aren't as big as this, so most centers, it doesn't really matter. Like, you only want one shoe store anyways, so it's not really a big deal. And when we were negotiating a lease, we would look and see, well, what is it that they're saying? If they say, again, about shoe stores, it might say, you can't do a certain quality shoe store, but you can do a different quality shoe store. We would never say all shoe stores or no one else can show shoes. So we professionally would always try to limit as much as possible anything like that. So there's uses restrictions, there's parking restrictions. You can't do stuff in my parking lot in front of my store. Why? Because they want parking for their customers, not for me to do something in their parking. And that's why we were talking about some of the events that you might want to have in the center. There's certain places we just could never do it because there's a lease that says you can't do anything in my parking lot, for instance.
That is definitely a question I know that we have. So I'm going to let other
But
council
did I
members
answer your question? I'm not, I hope I did.
I think so, but I was thinking more along like Prost, and they have their own future shipping headquarters of beer and whatnot. So something, I don't know, like a BJ brew house or something, that would have a brew house in the name. Is there any restriction or a conflict? Of course, you wouldn't want too many of the same types of businesses. That wouldn't make sense. But that was more of my question.
We have the Cadillac, so why do we want,
You don't
a
want-
Chevy,
No,
right?
you don't want a Chevy,
Yeah.
right? Well, keep that thought. Let's put a pin in that because we want the Cadillac. Okay, Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. First of all, what you've just kind of conveyed here is, I think, a very successful turnaround story, and you invested a lot. So I want to, first of all, acknowledge that, Mr. Hutensky. And then, second, just for my clarity and understanding, what I believe is operating easement agreement, is that what?
Yes. Oh, yeah, yeah.
OEA means?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm former military, so I throw around acronyms left and right. But the way I think about it is it kind of creates a prisoner's dilemma. You're familiar with that concept?
Yes, I am.
So when you say simplify or eliminate OEAs, it's really, as you're talking about, some of these old leases that might have exclusivity sort of clauses, trying to loosen those up so you have a little bit more flexibility. Is that kind of?
So just
What you're
to be clear,
suggesting.
what's in the leases and the OEA are two completely different things, except that the leases say you can't change the OEA. Like, we went to the center because of the OEAs saying, the quality of the architecture, whatever it says. That's important as the tenant, is another reason why I can't change the OEA. But how I'm gonna change the OEA is, right now, there's 3 people can vote. I have 2 of the votes, Lowe's has the other vote. So we can make changes. The city has put upon us that we can't change the OEA without their approval. So they effectively have a vote on what we change we'd make. But the the OEA is just like an outdated plan for the property. Its uses, I mean, it was 1998. They barely had computers then, or, you know, whatever. So it's like, it's totally, the uses and everything else like that is totally out of date. It's more than, what, 26 years old. So what we would want to do is, there's a way to amend that document, and it might take some time, but with the city's help, we could do that. And so what we would want to do is figure out what are all the uses that we want in the center, what roads would we want to move? For instance, it says you can't move any road in the center or any exit of the center. And it may be if you wanted to do something in the middle, you would, you know, maybe you'd go down and you'd go out to the left and the right and go a different way or whatever, something like that. You can't do that now. And so we'd want to change some of that to better use the land that's there. I mean, and so in doing that, we'd have to get approval. So what we would do is first, you know, figure out what we want to do, write a new OEA, you know, that talks about how things are, but it would be favorable, it'd be a lot easier, and it would be a lot easier to change. And then we would go to the city and work with them, and if they were okay with it, then we'd go to the tenants and we'd get that approved, and then we'd have a new OEA. So that would add value to the property, same as buying the old Mervyn's building adds value because you now control your destiny. There's not someone telling you what to do. So, but the tenant leases, if the tenant leases say you can't do something, you still wouldn't be able to do that unless you change the tenant lease. So they're like overlapping, sometimes they're conflicting, and they're frankly extremely difficult to understand as well. So, you know, there's a lot of, but I'll give you an instance. So when we needed the Prost deal, the tenant leases and the OEA all said you can't do certain uses. You can't do a rendering plant, which I guess is like taking animal fat and doing whatever, I don't know. But there are these clauses that are in every lease I've ever done. They have all these clauses. And one of the things says you can't do manufacturing. And then you go, well, what's a brewery? A brewery's manufacturing. They're manufacturing beer. So we had to go to 8 anchor tenants and convince them that this was a good idea to do it, the brewery was gonna help, the beer garden was gonna help, and we should be okay to do it. And so then they approve it, but then they say, the real estate guys who I know say, yeah, it's no problem. But then we have another department that's gonna tell you how much you have to pay me to allow you to do this brewery. So that's what happened. We went through 8 tenants, we got them approved. Then we had to modify the OEA and go through that whole process to do the brewery. So even though it was a great tenant, and even though it was wonderful for the property and wonderful for the city, et cetera, it wasn't like I talked to the DeLines, we signed an agreement, and I put them in. Like, there were all this other stuff that had to happen, which was difficult. And like, the wall between them and Joanne had to be a certain kind of wall because of code, which was fine, but that had to be done. And the roof and it, so the point being that these things are complicated. And what I'm trying to do is take the OEA piece out by making that okay, and then I just have to deal with the tenant leases. So I don't know if that clarified or.
Now in my mind, I'm thinking Tetris, and thank you for clarifying the fact that.
You're thinking I don't get paid enough is what you're thinking, I know that.
Well, I work for food. But, you know, I guess what it really helps me understand is that the OEA is a separate document.
Yes,
And you're saying that not all anchor tenants are on there, it's just 2 votes from Lowe's. HCP has a vote and the city has a vote, right?
think of like, you have all these leases with the tenants, and then on top of it, or below it, there's this blanket agreement that dictates what you can do with the land. Same as the city has rules about what I can do zoning wise and parking and all that kind of thing. That's another layer on top of it. And then et cetera. And then there's like economic viability, like that it actually makes sense economically. So those are like the 5 layer cakes, if you will, of all the things that have to be done. And I'm just trying to get rid of one of them, which is the OEA, or at least simplify that piece.
Gotcha, thank you. Well, I appreciate this education. I'm not an expert or knowledgeable about retail, real estate by any stretch of imagination. I do want to ask one other question, that is, I don't know if you're familiar with, in San Diego, I lived there for a number of years, the Naval Training Center. And when the Navy sold that back to San Diego, they started redeveloping that, anchored largely by Stone Brewery. Are you familiar with that?
I've been there, like, is that not the Gaslight, you're not talking about?
No, not the Gaslamp
Okay.
District, but
Yeah.
rather the former Navy.
Then I haven't, no.
But just to thumbnail this briefly for you, Stone Brewery as the anchor kind of was the catalyst to bring in a whole variety of delis, restaurants, entertainment, that sort of thing. Do you kind of foresee the same thing happening with the market?
Yeah, I would like, I don't think the whole center, but I think the Prost end of it could be like that. And if we, if I just go back to the plan maybe. So, like, I think this area here, maybe going over here, if we can do something here that makes this, along with this 3.5 acres, makes this feel more like a district instead of a big center. You can't change this. This is a huge, massive power center. Like I said, it's a 1/4 mile from here down to here. And you can't, I mean, I don't know, the architect today that I met with said he thinks he can come up with some things to help change that, but I'm not sure. But what I do think is that this section over here, maybe we can create what you're talking about and make those kinds of tenants there. That's what I'd like to do. I think that's the right way. And almost that's a different center, or a center within a center, if you will.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Exactly what I was thinking, like the Stanley Marketplace, that's kind of an entertainment district of sorts. Lots of other questions. Councilmember Burns, I think you were next.
Doesn't matter, but thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to start off by saying Gross is awesome. We go like almost every weekend. Great place to bring your kids. There's lots of dirt for them to roll around in. I guess too, because I see what you're saying, because like you turn into that 1/4 mile and it feels, like a parking lot desert. It doesn't seem very appealing, and then it kind of like opens up into Gross, which is nice. The other thing, just from our point of view, is with younger, young families like moving into the area, we actually walk. We take the I-25 bridge over, throw the kids in the wagon and go. It's 15 minutes.
So that's this right here, right? Okay.
And so if there's anything, like that would be along there, any kind of vitalization I think would be really nice too, just so that Gross isn't the only destination, as like we are walking. And I don't know if anyone else is gonna bring up the farmer's market or anything that we want to talk about.
Go for it.
Okay. Because that is something that we've talked about on council a few times, like of what to do, like how to sort of like revitalize the parking lotness of it all. Almost like a painted tree outside kind of situation, or like a farmer's market or something. I know we've talked a lot about to sort of bring more people in and then get into the different stores there. But yeah, that's about it. I'm very excited about this. I think with young families moving into Northglenn, or I'm sure you know all of our statistical data, I think this will be awesome. And I even see sort of like the rippling effect like across, hopefully into, where Applebee's is, and like sort of around more people going to Dutch Bros, that sort of thing. I think this is great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Walker.
Mr. Brad, did you come all the way? Thank you. Mr. Brad, did you come all the way from Connecticut?
I did.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for being here. I've got a small question. It's for Miss Allison. I'm just kind of curious. It's small. These are some big level ideas, and I've got some small ones, but it's something that thousands of people see every day. And Miss Allison, I'm sure you're aware of the green signage that we have when you're going eastbound on 104th that points in. It still has Cakes by Karen's on it. And it's seen better days. So I didn't know if we've got a lot of investment from Mr. Brad and his company, and so I didn't know if are there any plans to update that signage to go with that?
So those signs are established in the municipal code. So we have a couple of ideas, and we'll be talking to you, I think, later this year about either repairing or just taking the signs down. They kind of come from an era before we had cell phones to direct us to all the places that we want to go, right? So it may be time for them to come down, but we're gathering up some information. And so we'll come to you later this summer and have some more information.
Sounds good. Thank you, Miss Allison. That's it.
No, thank you. Councilmember Roper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you for this wonderful presentation. Really, as my councilmate, Councilmember Kondo said, this really is a turnaround story, and I know just from having lived here and seeing the mall to now the marketplace, and now seeing the improvements that have taken place there. I know my family frequents it much more, and even allowing my children to go over there unaccompanied. I feel good about that, so thank you for that. And I think we do value this area as really the heart of Northglenn, and so making those additional improvements, outstanding. It sounds like definitely making an amendment to the OEA is important, and as you said, this was done 26 years ago, and so as we want the marketplace to change and improve and stay up with the times, I think we need to make sure that OEA is as well. my question is for you, outside of the OEA, what do you see as your biggest obstacle in bringing this from a B plus center to a B plus?
You know, I think at this point, there's like a lot of different options. There's a lot of different ways that we can go, and trying to figure out which is the best financially for us, but also for the city, and also for creating value, you know, in the property for the long term. And so that's what I've engaged. I just engaged this architect a couple months ago, but he was there today. We were touring and saying, you know, some of the what ifs, like what could we do and whatever. Like we've never really explored that bridge and what does that do and where does that go to, and like, you know, how can we pull people across that bridge into the property and what does that mean? You know, now it's kind of like, you know, when you're, I don't know, if you're drowning, your first thing is survival, like I gotta survive. And now that we've gotten past that, we can step back and look at some of these things. And I think, you know, the Bed Bath, while, you know, we spent $2 million to take them, move them from here to there, and they're gone. We got zero for that. The fact that that's vacant now actually could be a good thing, because it could be used in a way, you know, either, you know, rethink it, like, I mean, one of the things is, you know, maybe it should be split into two, maybe it should, you know, maybe a new tenant. I mean, that's one of the best spaces in the property because of the highway visibility. And so how we use that is key. How we use this land here is key. This building here, right, you have the furniture up above, and, you know, it's fine. Woodley's is a solid production. I was just there today. But I'm not sure if they're gonna be there forever. And down below, we had, well, K&G is there. They came back from the dead. They filed bankruptcy and they stayed. And they actually doing okay. And then Tuesday morning. So what do we do with that building? Because that was one tenant once, Mervin's. And there's escalators and elevators, and, you know, that's a different kind of challenge, figuring out what to do there. And, you know, these spaces here and these spaces here, what's the best use of those? And then, again, can we design something that will fundamentally change the feel, that make this feel a little bit more walkable? You know, I'm not sure if we could eliminate this road, because that's how people get to every place in the property. But, you know, maybe we could put some stuff on the side of it or whatever. And I don't know if it's landscaping or if it's buildings or what it is, but whatever. But the idea is come away with a plan, like a 10-year plan, talk to all the stakeholders, the people in this room, citizens, whatever, and see what people think about it, and see, like, is this kind of the vision for the next 10 years or 20 years, whatever it is for the property. That's what I think. So the challenge, I guess, is when you have lots of options. If you only have one option, then it's not that challenging, you know, but when you have lots of options, sometimes it's more challenging. So the answer is I don't know. It's not, I know if there's vacant spaces, I know how to lease them. That's what I've done for 40 years. But when you say, like, how do you make a long drive feel differently, or how do you make something feel more walkable, that's a lot harder to put your finger on and figure out and really know what to do. So with your help, hopefully we can get that done.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Goff, waiting patiently.
It's okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I can remember when there was a May DNF shopping area. So that's probably more than 26 years ago. But one of the things that I noticed, I'll say a couple of things, is my husband might, like, drop me off at Joann's and then he goes to Lowe's. And then to walk from one to the other, no shade, just concrete. And
Yep.
sometimes it feels a little unsafe to try to walk between parked cars. So if there was the walkability part of this, I think would be a huge benefit if you could
I
pull
agree.
that off. And the other thing is that I would ride a bike. I have an electric bike. And so I wouldn't come the way that Councilmember Burns did. There's another tunnel that goes under I-25 further north, I guess, of that one. And then I would be coming down the road by, you know, behind Prost. So that's another place, I think, if you're talking about trying to encourage, you know, different ways of accessing a bike path, it's not really a bike path not through the neighborhood, but something along those lines. And as a city, maybe we can look at that, ways to help with that. And then the other thing I would say with that is, if really right now, the way our climate is changing, if there could be a shaded place to park and lock your bike. That would be, I've seen places where they have like a little solar panel on the top, and that's the shade for the bikes underneath, but something like that, because more and more people are biking. Electric bikes are everywhere now. And I don't even usually bike to the rec center because there's no place to park in the shade. So I think that's something to consider.
Yeah, it's funny, we were talking to the architect today about bikes, and I said, I just don't know how many people bike here or not, but we gotta find out and see, and certainly, you know, with the environment and everything, if people are biking, we should certainly make it easy for them, a place to put their bikes, lock them up, you know, shade or whatever you say, so thank you for that. I think that's, you know, we just talked about that today, so that's very
Okay.
apropos.
Great, and then my other question is, it has to do with the northwest corner, which on your picture there is below Prost.
Yep.
Is, like, whose parking is that? Does it like associate with a particular store, or is it just the general?
No, that's not really being used at all. I mean, that's.
That's my point.
I think that's developable land. I mean, you know, I guess, you know, sitting here today, I can't tell you what the use is. What the architects is gonna do is the highest and best use. What is the best use of that land? And certainly, we will talk, you know, I guess, well, no matter what it is, we would have to get city approval before we did anything, and I'd wanna do that anyway, so, you know, but I don't know if, what the best use is there. So that's part of our plan, but like I said, you know, going from D- to B+, okay, we've done that, and the land, you know, having vacant land wasn't a problem, because we had more than enough space to lease. Now you have to say, what's the best use? And I really do think that whatever I do on that piece of land, we're gonna wanna do something that's conducive to that area of the property, the Prost area, and all the area we're talking about. So I think if, like I said, a center within a center, at least is my working title right now, that area would be. But I do think, you know, the walkability and bikeability, those are something the whole center should be, and we need to figure out how to do that too, so we will.
All right, that's it for me, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Goff. Thank you for bringing that up, because as Ward 4 representatives, we hear that a lot from our residents, is please increase the walkability in the marketplace, increase the walkability. So it's glad that I'm glad that that's on your radar. We still have lots of follow-up questions here. Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Something I forgot to say in the first round is also our Deputy Chief of Police mentioned, he gave us a report on flap cameras, and so we just wanted to say thank you so much for your partnership in that with the city. It's been really helpful. And also thank you again so much for looking into the future and like working with an architect about how to like revitalize this space even, and just staying current with us as a city. We're currently doing our 5-year strategic planning as well. And so I think the future is on all of our minds. So this is really exciting to hear. But yeah, so just thank you for your continued partnership with.
Thank you for bringing up the cameras, because that has been a really good thing. I mean, we now have 24 hours, we see everything that's happening. And, you know, frankly, organized retail crime is one of the biggest problems in the shopping center industry. And people, you know, walk into a store and walk out with stuff and, you know, forget about the kind of, you know, social contract of like who does that, but it's caused retailers incredible losses as far as just, you know, people stealing and shrinkage and whatever, that kind of thing. So we were able to catch someone because of the flock towers and because of the police was amazing here as their cooperation and their ability of backing us up. Because what happens is if we find someone and their police don't come, nothing happens. We can't do anything, and no one in the store will touch anyone because of liability reasons. So the cooperation with the police, and they recommended those cameras, that's what we got, and I think that's been a nice story so far.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Excellent follow-up question. Very good, and thank you. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. So I'm not the great ideas guy, but I wanted to just offer a few things as I brainstormed here. And as Councilmember Burns talked about, not only are we doing our 5-year strategic plan, but we're doing our sub-area plans, which I believe we involve some of the retail / high-density mixed-use residential retail west of Melody Drive. And so it caused me to think about the fact that I think we had a rezoning decision to support Headwaters Independent Living. And that's just due west of Prost. Not a bunch of elderly people are gonna go drink a whole lot, but just something to keep in mind.
You never know.
Well, I guess I'm part of that demographic, so I'll be drinking. Okay, I am. But The other thing I'd ask you to consider is just south of there on West 106th Avenue. That used to be many years ago, kind of an RTD bus terminal, when a lot of people used to ride buses. And unfortunately, due to various factors and things like that, I don't think it's actively used now. But I'm just thinking to myself as we look at the future and think about transit-oriented communities and that sort of thing, and your need to get more people to Prost. And I'm just saying to myself, if there was a way to reactivate that transit node, I think that might be one possible option. So,
Okay, noted.
But I
And by
do
the way,
love
I
your
just,
beer
I did
and I love your
agree,
brats.
I did agree, Brooke asked me, I did agree to participate in the Melody Road stuff, so we'll, Melody Drive, sorry. And we'll, we look forward to that. I mean, I think we're the biggest part of it, so it's good that we're participating.
That was kind of where I'm at. I think that you have a lot of great stuff happening there east of Melody, and I'm just thinking to myself, there has to be opportunity for spillover effect or synergies happening across that road.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any more hands, so I have a couple of questions, just because my brain thinks very much from the business perspective. So in terms of, you're talking about that Cadillac. We have the Cadillac, we don't want the Chevy, and I see and hear and really love that that's your vision for that area by Prost, because I do think that's important. And I'll just repeat some of the things that I know we've all heard, and especially Ward 4, because Marketplace is in Ward 4, in terms of that Bed Bath & Beyond place, like bringing in a tenant that, I would use the word, and I hate to use it, higher caliber or high quality, just because some of the perceptions are, well, I don't use the DD's discount, or I don't go to Ross's, like I want something else. So is that part of the vision? And I totally understand that, right? The market drives and everything and demographics. You also mentioned that we are a lower income, right, even though we have a higher density within that 3-mile range. But we also have that I-25 corridor, and I think that in and of itself adds that much more value in terms of bringing in demographic from other areas, right, that maybe Orchards doesn't have because they're not right off one of those major highways. So what are your thoughts on that, or,
Well, first of all, I didn't mean in any way to suggest that I think Orchards is better. I don't think that.
Oh,
I'm
no,
just
great,
thinking that
yeah.
it's different.
Different.
And that, but I think that you're totally right. I-25 is huge. And the back of that building, Bed Bath painted their sign on there. And we think that's a great billboard. I mean, assuming it's legal to do, but just to put other signs back there and do that. And we're fixing the signage as you get off the ramp, those green signs, we're redoing all those. So I think you're right that is a huge draw from that. But the question is, based on the tenants who are already here, that also matters to people. And, I mean, look, I'll put the best tenant I can there. That's what I'm trying to do. But it's, first of all, it's a 25,000 square foot building. So if you want to be 15,000 square feet or 40,000 square feet, you can't go there. It has to be someone who's that size. And then it has to be someone that isn't restricted by a lease. And it has to be someone that isn't restricted by the OEA. It has to be someone who wants to be in Northglenn. And like, there's this long list of things that we have, and we have all these relationships. But if a tenant has a restriction in their lease and I say, I want to put this tenant in, and they say no, it's somewhat of a problem. I can't really, do that, or I get sued or whatever. So I guess what I'd say is we'll put the best tenant we can. We'll use that space the best way we can. And even today, we started thinking about some, we were just brainstorming with the possible ways we could use that part of the center. And is there a way we can do something, besides just filling the box, but maybe doing something with some of the parking field or whatever, that to actually make it feel like you were going by something, not just going down a long highway. So I will do the best we can. And I will put the best tenant I can, not even because I want you to be happy, because I want me to be happy. I mean, the better tenant I put in, that's better for me too. So we're in the same place here, but there are limits. And I mean, I will tell you, anyone here has an idea for a tenant, email me or email Allison, she'll get a hold of me. And, we'll tell you, we've either talked to them and they said no, or, I mean, hopefully we won't say, wow, I didn't think of that. That's such a great idea. Let us go do it. But maybe, I'm not proud. I don't care. If you found the tenant, that'd be the happiest day of my life, because you'd like me, I'd like you, and the center would be great, and we'd have a, you know, a great new tenant. But, you know, I'm just saying, so if you have an idea in all seriousness, please tell us. We'd be happy to follow up, and we'll talk to them. We know all these people, and we can see what we can do.
You know, thank you. Thank you for that openness and just, I think we all feel pretty heard, and I really appreciate that, and I feel that. So, of course, I've heard Trader Joe's. I'm sure you've heard it, but why don't we, everybody's laughing because it's.
Someone who's not
somebody's
here brought
area.
up Trader Joe's to me in the last
Yeah.
week, so.
And I get it, maybe we're not their demographic, but just that area is so prime, like, it's so in your face when you're driving down I-25. And now that we have, you know, the Painted Tree and we have Prost. I'd
I
love that
promised
I-
I will give Trader Joe's another call, and I will tell Allison what they said. How
Yeah,
about that?
say,
Okay.
we
That'd be
are the
great.
future. We
That'd
are
be
the
great.
future. Maybe, you know, we were the old marketplace in the past, but looking forward, I think we're going to be the it place. We're going to be the new it place. I totally believe it with all the redevelopment we have. And with that kind of attitude, which is amazing. Really do appreciate that. So for clarification, that OEA, I'm still trying to understand all that. I'm on the Neura board, by the way.
Yep.
Pretty new. I'm one of the newest, I am the newest member. Appointed by council, so looking forward to the next session as well. But thinking about that OEA, so when other council members have mentioned, you know, that middle strip, that would, you can't really do anything unless that's changed, right? Have you reached out to the city already on looking at that, or what does that process look like? I'm just curious, maybe that's a staff question, I don't know, or.
Well, so I guess what I was trying to say is, I haven't quite figured that all out now. I figured out how to get it to 86%, which is where it is now. And now is the time that I hired this architect, and now we're gonna do all that, think about all this stuff, and then there'll be a process where people have input, and we'll say, this is how we get to the rest of the level, and this is how we do the road, or whatever else we're gonna do here. So we'll have a comprehensive plan that we'll share, and then, you know, hopefully agree on, and then we can move ahead with that plan, of which part of it will be the OEA or the whatever, all those things, once and for all, will have to all, you know, say for that plan. And if, let's say hypothetically, you know, this isn't my plan, but let's just say you said you were gonna do a fitness center here. So now we go ahead and do, I'm not gonna do that, don't worry. But let's just say that that's what we all decided was the right thing. So now the OEA would say you could do a fitness center there. You know, all the tenant leases that I had to get approved would all say there's a fitness center there. And even though we're not doing a fitness center there, you know, we would have the right to do that whenever we wanted without going to anybody, and that would all be set and ready to go, okay? But when we do this plan, like, we may say fitness center, and if hypothetically, we didn't do the fitness center for 10 years, and now there's like a new kind of business that none of us ever thought of, we'd be kind of right, like 10, 15, 20 years from now, you're gonna have to do this again, because there'd be new uses that we never thought of. We only knew about the uses we knew now, and what we would do there. And, you know, I don't know, if people did 5 breweries, for instance, all in the same place, which they don't do now, and that happened, then we wouldn't be able to do 5 breweries. We'd have to go get it changed if we wanted to do that. So what we're gonna do, us, architects, stakeholders, is collectively think, what are the best things we could do for this property? What do we think the uses that we're gonna wanna do? Not have to worry about where we're gonna put them just yet, but allow us to do, you know, these 10 or 20 uses that we don't have now. And allow us to do them in certain places, and allow to fix the roads, do this, that. We're gonna have a new plan. And then that's gonna allow the, you know, the owners of the property, whether it's us or somebody else, to then execute a lot easier the right thing for the property. So it's gonna be, it's kind of, think about it like a zoning. Like, so in zoning, you said you can do retail here. But if suddenly, I don't know if we're even allowed to do medically, but let's say we want to do a hospital here, you said that was the right thing, zoning says you can't do that. So then you have to amend the zoning, and if you do zoning that allows you to do a hospital, then you can do a hospital there. You might not do a hospital, but you should be allowed to do that kind of thing. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be setting up a new set of rules for all the things we can do here, and hopefully it'll be a plan that'll last a long time, and that's what we're going to try to do. I don't know, so did I enlighten or frighten?
No, I understand. I was gonna ask our city manager, because I would love to know, like, what that process would actually look like. And of course, I know there's pros, there's cons, there's all the things that happen when you change something like that. So city manager, please.
So it depends on the desired use outcome in terms of how involved with the city. So you have Nura, which is the primary entity here, and NURA approves the OEA amendments. So the last OEA amendment that came forward to NURA was in November of 2022. So they're the decision-making body in this regard. But like Mr. Hutensky alluded to, there's other connections in terms of process that the city would be involved with. And those can go multiple different routes. And Corey, I think, is going to add on to that.
I just want to give context to the OEA. Councilmember Goff mentioned May DNF, and I think of Furs as one of the last stores that was there at the old North Glen Mall. But that is a reflection, as of the time that the North Glen Mall came down, of trying to keep a certain quality of redevelopment at 104th and I-25. And so at the time the OEA was created, it was done so that reflecting a strip center at that time and what was the type of redevelopment that was happening in the late 90s, early 2000s. There is no doubt that I think it would be appropriate to revisit the OEA, but I don't want to lose sight of what the benefit is to NURA and the city, which is to keep a certain quality of development, which is what the city and NURA were buying in the late 90s. The market has changed dramatically, and the OEA as amended, should reflect that, but that's its origin.
And to eliminate that?
I'm not sure I would recommend eliminating it.
That was some of the words that were there.
Yeah, I mean, I think of centers along Federal Boulevard that are not necessary,
Yes.
over time, and it's not what HCP might do, but you're looking 10, 15, 20, 25 years ahead and making sure that the property is still of a certain quality.
Can I amend my comments? I don't, when I say eliminate it, we get rid of the one we have now, but there has to be a new one. You have to have rules for engagement.
Agreed.
All my tenants require it, and you would want it, and we'd all want it. Everyone, the owner would want it, everyone would want it. So it just, that, I think Corey said it very well. We have a 1998 one, and we need a 2025 one, and that's what we'll do. So we'll have a new one, but, you need rules of the road. You need to talk about how things work, and we will definitely have that. So I think that's a better way of saying it than I said it.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what my brain needed to fit in, to understand all the pieces. So thank you for that clarification. Councilmember Goff, do you have a follow-up question?
Well, I just had this idea as we've been talking. At Webster Lake Promenade, which was a development that we just did recently, well, relatively recently, the city did, maybe it was I'm not sure, but somehow the city was involved in putting some sculptural pieces in there. And I just think that might be something that could be included in whatever plan that you're looking at, that at least that's a possibility. So keep that in mind. We may be able to do something to enhance the appearance of it in some way.
Yeah, no, I think art is an important part of every community, and it should be represented here. And I know behind us on Kennedy, there's like some art there. And so maybe, I in fact said today to the architect, why don't you figure out what that is and see if we can somehow combine or work with that and enhance that a little bit. So I think we would do that. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunity for that, for sure.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I have just a couple more questions.
Sure, I'm here.
Super quick. So first of all, thank you for helping businesses during COVID, because as someone who's leased in 5 different spaces, I will say none of those landlords helped us, and it was very difficult, but we made it through. So I appreciate landlords who take a stake in making sure their tenants survive. So I'll just give a shout out on behalf of all small business owners.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And then just thinking about the expenses, right, of moving tenants in here. Do you offer like tenant improvement finishes? Is that part of the deal? Do they work that into their lease if they need walls torn down?
Yeah, I don't
or-
offer, they demand would be a better way of saying
Okay,
it. But
that's-
yes, they get it.
I understand that too. Okay. I thought I had one more piece related to that, but I can't remember it and I didn't write it down, so I'll move on. My last question for you is, have you thought about or considered not just farmer's market, because that's more involved, right, having to get all these big pieces, but just one of our landlords in Broomfield does events for the center that are just like, they'll bring in a band or a stage and face painters and something for the kids. And maybe it's tied in with Halloween or Easter or something like that. And it increases walkability and attendance and purchasing and, you know, maybe thinking about places like Prost and the Painted Tree, encourage people to go, oh, I've never actually been in there while they're walking around doing these fun things for their kids. So I'm just curious if you've done anything like that. There's only one of my landlords that does that, and I love it because it really drives a lot of business to our door, you know, to the point that we can't even fit everybody in. It's so great. So I'm just curious. I know this is a much bigger area, if you've thought about
Well, we're,
something
you know,
like
we've
that.
certainly, I know we're doing the shred event.
that's
And
great.
we've done some others, but, I mean, we're definitely open to anything, and there's, you know, a process, just, you know, tell Allison and she'll call the right person in our company, and if we can do it, we happy to accommodate. Like I said, we do have some restrictions in the leases. There's certain places we could never do anything because the lease says you absolutely can't do it there.
Okay.
I also think that what's clear from this conversation is that, you know, the walkability really needs to improve quite a bit before you can feel comfortable like doing stuff. If you're taking your life in your hands, you know, kind of going around the center, that doesn't sound like, we may not be ready for that just yet to have those, but once we figure all this stuff out, then I think, you know, hopefully, I mean, it sounds like we need to, it would be good to have a place where we can do stuff all the time in the center. And so, you know, that'll be something we'll put on the list. We're not gonna be able to get every single thing, you know, that everyone wants, but we'll try. And I think that's, you know, I would say a gathering place, you know, or a exhibition place. I mean, hopefully we won't have this vast parking lot anymore that's, you know, it'll be a little bit more cut up, so you wouldn't feel the need to have stuff there, because it'll just by itself be okay. But yes, we're happy to talk to you about anything. We'll do it. I mean, the city's been very good to us. We want to do everything we can to the city. We want to be a good neighbor. We want to be helpful. And so, you know, just ask us, and if we can do it, we'll do it.
Great. That is excellent. There's still one question I know I had. It's bugging me because I can't remember what it is, but.
Well, you know
I think we
Allison,
asked
you could just
lots of
tell Allison and
questions.
I'll be happy to call you or email you, whatever, when you think of it.
Yeah,
Mayor
absolutely.
Pro Tem,
Yes.
can I add some context related to events, and then maybe you'll think of your question?
That'll be great. Thank you.
So I wanted to provide an update to council. There were several suggestions related to different types of events in the strategic planning, new ideas process. So council will see a draft of the strategic plan next Monday, and I've combined those ideas because they're related to events, specifically at the marketplace. Last week, Rachel and I spoke with Gretchen, Boyd, and David with Prost, and got some information on what they're planning Oktoberfest-wise for 2024. They're looking at a small-scale event. So really utilization of their existing space, the outdoor area and the stage area. They do want to position themselves to be the Oktoberfest for the Metro North area. So in terms of looking at what does city support look like this year in 2024, knowing that we have the strategic plan ideas, there's a longer-term vision, there's a lot of work that would need to be done in partnership with Prost and other entities for that matter for a 2025 event. I suggested that Gretchen provide me with some options in terms of the city sponsoring their event that they're building this year. Again, small scale is what Gretchen referred to it as. So I'm waiting to hear from her in terms of what that might look like. And then in terms of sponsorship requests, those go to the outside agency funding committee, right? And so that's what we're looking at right now in regard to Oktoberfest as a possibility to, you know, partner with them and do something in terms of, they've talked about possibly having a costume contest, and so maybe council can help judge the costume contest. They've talked about doing a small dog race, so it's not exclusive to a certain type of dog other than small dog, because I think it's more of a tradition to do, I think, different like dachshund, wiener dog races in at different Oktoberfest events. But there's different size and scales. They talked about keg bowling and several other different types of fun events they can do on a small scale this year. So please know we're in communication with them. I'm waiting for some information back from Gretchen, and then certainly that information will be brought forward to city council as appropriate. And then in terms of the strategic planning ideas, those will come back to you next week, and council can weigh in as we move forward in the months ahead.
Thank you for that. Are there any other burning questions that you want to ask? No. So I think I'll just close with that. I'm pretty sure I asked my question and interweaved with the other questions I had, but I guess, I know it's you who's responsible for leasing and getting those folks in there, but and maybe city manager guy or kind of answered like what kind of support you need from us, or just keep giving you those ideas, passing them along to Allison, maybe is the more appropriate channel if somebody thinks of a cool tenant that could be in that place.
I mean,
or something.
behind the scenes, Allison's a great facilitator. Like, we call her all the time and she says, oh, let me see the building department can speed that up, or let me do this, do that. I mean, that's really how we need the help. We want to follow all the rules, but sometimes expediting is really helpful, or at least getting someone on the phone so we can talk to them and find out what the problem is or deal with it. I mean, it's all problem solving for the most part. So I think you guys are doing a great job, First Debbie, then Allison is doing a great job doing that. Heather's available when I need her. I mean, it's just, are you allowed to use first names here? I don't know.
It's okay.
So, but seriously, I think you have been terrific, and it's the sum total, and, the fact that you care so much, that makes a big difference, and that makes it helpful. I'd rather, work with people who care than people who don't care, so it's good that you do. And, keep shopping there, keep going to Prost, and, we'll, hopefully next time I come, we'll be a little better than B+. We'll be, but there will be a participatory thing where people have an opportunity, to talk, and I'll really deal with your staff to find out what's the best way to do that, we'll figure out, but people will get their views, and it'll be collaborative, because you're all a part of this. You're all part of the network and the patchwork that makes that property what it is. And so your views as individuals and your views with your position in the city are both important.
Oh, thank you. We have a Ward 4 meeting this Thursday, so I'm sure we will hear from Ward 4 residents about the marketplace, because that is the #1 topic.
It's not a democracy, but it will be, I want everyone's thoughts, honest. And I'll do the best I can with all of those different views, which will be conflicting, and try to come up with something that pleases the most people that we can, and still economically viable, and still does, long-term what the city wants.
Well, this was great, and I hope this happens more often too, this kind of touch base with us every so often, just because if we don't know what we don't know. And I'd love to just keep pushing that Cadillac idea out there, and that A+ for that area with the remaining space that's, so precious and valuable because it has so much potential. So I think, and I speak for myself, but I know I've heard it collectively, we just really want to see more elevated spaces and businesses, and maybe that entertainment district or center within a center. So I'd say just please keep that at top of
Okay.
mind.
I will.
Thank you. Yes, City Manager
Can I add
Guyer?
one last comment
Yes.
in reference to, Allison's role, my role, Jason, Corey, Nura's role? We're all collectively working together. So, when you're traveling to other states and cities, when you see someplace, a lot of Allison's continually advocating on behalf of the city, and so I'll share ideas with her, she'll share them with Brad, or those ideas that are appropriate for Carl's Farm will get shared with Center Group for Carl's Farm, and that's true for all of the different shopping centers throughout the city. So please share ideas, and then we'll close the loop, but it's a continual process. If you see a place, we use the example of Trader Joe's tonight. There's lots of examples, right, that we could use. And so know that staff's working in that regard. And Brad has done a great job in terms of he'll reach out to us and say, what do you think? And we'll give them honest feedback. And so to have that relationship and partnership with HCP is tremendous, and that doesn't always exist with other owners or developers for that matter. So we're greatly appreciative of that. And like you said, in terms of, making sure we're expediting things, getting building inspections done as quickly as possible to get tenants open. We did that with Prost. And while it was very much a behind the scenes, it's like we need to get them open as quickly as possible, and staff did everything to make that happen. So please know that is a process that happens behind the scenes. We don't tell you that in public meetings because we just do it, but it is happening. So just wanted to add that context.
Thank you. And, I'm sure there's a lot we take for granted because we don't see it. So I appreciate staff and all the hard work. And, and I'm lucky enough to serve on the Business Retention and Expansion Committee with Allison, so I see.
Are you on every committee?
Yes. So I see all the hard work that she puts into that as well, and reaching out to businesses and in the marketplace. I know we have a walkthrough coming up, I think, in the summer. So she's definitely very involved. And thank you. Thank you, Allison and the team, and Nura. I'm really happy to be on Nura. Great people. But thank you so much for this,
sure.
Brad. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I think
Thank
we
you.
can let you go.
Thank you.
Maybe? Thank you. Great topic. Okay, next on the agenda, we have Urban Renewal 101, and our city attorney, Corey Hoffman, will be discussing this item with us. Thank you. Welcome.
Bringing a water bottle. and
Uh-oh.
lots of coffee.
Oh, we're in for it.
And
Yes,
where is
slides.
the little guy? Oh, there it is, okay.
We don't want to hear this again, but some of us heard it about 6 times.
That's fine. That's fine.
Bye, Leslie. Bye. Thanks for coming.
How do I get the?
Just click it.
Oh, we just go forward. Okay. So if you know the term Luddite, I am a recovering Luddite. So I am going to try to use this PowerPoint as best I can. But I think this is good to follow HCP because the purpose of this is really to talk about the nuts and bolts of urban renewal. And to try to, the city, well, let me start with this. You can divide up urban renewal into what the city council does and what the Urban Renewal Authority does. And in North Glen, for the last 20 years, it's been urban renewal. It's been NURA. The city hasn't adopted a plan in a number of years. And a lot of municipalities, as of 2016, stopped using the urban renewal tool, and we'll talk about why. But to put it at its most basic premise, the city council is responsible for adopting urban renewal plans, and NURA is responsible for implementing the plans of the city. So I want to start there. So urban renewal is a tool to eliminate blight. The nomenclature in urban renewal is unfortunate because when you talk to about initiating urban renewal, you are telling someone their property is, quote, blighted. Really what it means is that there are what I would call obstacles that the market can't address for a variety of reasons, and urban renewal creates a funding stream to assist with that, with net new tax revenue. But in order to get to urban renewal, property needs to be blighted. And what that involves is the city council having to consider whether property is in fact blighted with a tool called a condition survey. Urban renewal can assist in saying, hey, this property is blighted. We'd like to at least have you look at whether or not urban renewal is appropriate. And in Allison's memo, she talks about a number of priority areas in the city where urban renewal could be a tool, whether it is Washington Point and Washington Center, whether it's revisiting the marketplace or the marketplace annex, and there's other places located. But in order to get to first base, if you will, in the urban renewal context, you have to have property determined to be blighted. And what does that mean? It means you have to meet at least 4 of the factors in the urban renewal law. And those factors are as follows. The first one is slum, deteriorated, or deteriorating structures, the building itself, what I would call kind of traditional blight. And I know the DC's back there, but you think of Chicago. You think of, you think of buildings crumbling, and that's the first factor. The second one is something like predominance of defective or inadequate street layout. It could be that there's properties that you can't get access to, old roadway systems, easements that no longer work for properties where it makes it hard to get to various places. The third factor is faulty lot layout, which is related to predominance or of defective or inadequate street layout. Again, if there are hidden lots, if lots were divided in a way that no longer makes sense today but made sense 25, 50 years ago. And as a result, development is made more difficult, maybe financially unfeasible. The fourth factor, unsanitary or unsafe conditions, I think self-explanatory. The fifth factor, deterioration of site or other improvements. This is often sidewalks, roadways. It could be drainage structures. It could be public improvements that have just deteriorated over time. The next factor is unusual topography. Again, inadequate public improvements or utilities. The seventh factor is defective or unusual conditions of title, rendering the title unmarketable. So if you go back to the original North Glen Mall, it was owned by the New England Life Insurance Company. It had received it in a foreclosure. And so that title was difficult to clear, and ultimately the city had to go through a condemnation, or at least initiate a condemnation, and it was ultimately resolved because of title issues related to the North Glen Mall. You see other large malls historically in Colorado, Cinderella City, Villa Italia. Those were also urban renewal projects for many of the same reasons. The next factor is the existence of conditions that endanger life or property by fire or other causes. Again, I would go back to the traditional blighting conditions. Same with buildings that are unsafe, with building code violations. Environmental contamination is a factor. And then there's sort of a catch-all of the existence of health, safety, or welfare factors requiring high level of municipal services. So what happens in practical terms is a consultant comes in and reviews the property and looks at the 11 conditions of blight and creates a study that says that consultant's opinion as to whether or not a property is in fact blighted. Council has a hearing. If it determines conditions are blighted, it is authorized to approve an urban renewal plan and would typically do so as part of that process. So, in terms of relative roles, the city council is responsible for forming the urban renewal authority, establishing the boundaries of urban renewal areas, approving the urban renewal plan, and, if appropriate, authorizing the use of eminent domain. It's not required as part of urban renewal. And then the urban renewal authority carries out the plan of the city. And so when you look at what NURA has been doing for a number of years, it is carrying out the urban renewal plans that the city council approved years ago. So urban renewal authorities are known as, under Colorado law, they're known as bodies, corporate, and politic. What does that mean? They're sort of quasi-governmental entities. They have a lot of the attributes of a government, but they are not a governmental entity in the traditional sense. And most importantly, under Colorado law, they are not a Tabor entity because they do not impose a tax. And so that means that they can issue debt, authorize debt, authorize financing without an election because they don't have taxing power. And they have a lot of the other traditional powers, to sue and be sued, to arrange for, to construct public improvements. You've seen NURA do that over the years for this site, for the Civic Center site. They can look at new urban renewal areas and recommend to council that a new urban renewal area be established in X location, authorize the blight study, but ultimately it's city council that approves those things. Whatever the Urban Renewal Authority is doing, it has to be doing to eliminate blight. And one of the issues in Colorado historically is that urban renewal is a blight elimination tool. It is not an economic development tool. However, good urban renewal, good blight remediation will result in economic redevelopment, but it can't be the other way around. It's got to be actually eliminating blight first. So in 2015, the Colorado legislature adopted House Bill 1348. It was effective January 1st, 2016. It was done in response to what were perceived as abuses of urban renewal by other taxing entities, and this idea that urban renewal was taking tax revenue from the other taxing entities. So in a very general sense, the way urban renewal works is if a plan is approved, all net new property tax created by the redevelopment is increment, and it goes to the Urban Renewal Authority, pre-1348. The perception was that it wasn't really necessary, that urban renewal is acting too aggressively, and that if there was no urban renewal, the redevelopment would have occurred anyway at some point in the future. And so other taxing entities, counties, fire districts, other special districts, believed that A, it was being used as an economic redevelopment tool, and B, that it was taking increment that if the city would have just waited, the property would have developed without the tool. Urban renewal practitioners such as myself would say no, that but for the tool, the redevelopment wouldn't occur. That urban renewal is there when a property is not otherwise feasible, whether it be things like environmental contamination, things like the North Glen Mall, that it was too big a lift for the market to act without the assistance of urban renewal. And so House Bill 1348 created a number of new steps for the creation of a new urban renewal plan. And North Glen, like many other communities, frankly paused and hasn't had a new urban renewal plan or substantially modified an existing plan which would trigger House Bill 1348 since January 1st of 2016. So what does House Bill 1348 do? Well, first of all, it requires new members on the board, and I'm going to go back to that. The new members on the board are a member appointed by the county who need not be a county commissioner, a member from one of the special districts within one of the plan areas. The special districts select that member, and that member needs to be an elected official from one of the special districts. I would say more often than not, the special district member is a member of the fire district, if there is a fire district in the particular community. And frankly, that's because fire districts historically have been most adverse, in my opinion, to urban renewal, that they believe more than others that this is taking money that should otherwise be allocated to the fire district. The third new member is a member of the Board of Education. So it is a member of the school district, and that person also has to be an elected official. Because it is 3 new members, typically a 4th member is appointed by the mayor to keep the odd number of members on the Urban Renewal Authority. So that's the first thing House Bill 1348 does. The second is in terms of the process. As part of the adoption of a new urban renewal plan, you actually have to negotiate with every taxing entity whose property tax would be allocated under the urban renewal plan. And the goal of that negotiation is to address impacts on services. So let me give you an example. If it is a new multifamily residential development, it's going to create a lot of new students potentially. So you would want to negotiate with the school district on what they believe the impacts of a new urban renewal plan would be. Fire districts very much so want to be engaged in this conversation. I will give you examples on both sides. Pre-1348, I'm aware of an urban renewal plan where one of the uses was an assisted living facility. Did that create a huge burden on the fire district in that particular community? The answer is yes, because the folks at the facility, if someone fell out of bed, didn't assist them, they had to call the fire department. So that had a real-world impact. By contrast, I would suggest if you're doing redevelopment of buildings that were previously not sprinkled and are now sprinkled as part of the redevelopment, I would suggest it may actually have a reduced impact on the fire district. I'm going to suggest to you most fire districts would disagree with me, but that's part of the reason you have the negotiations. And the negotiations are about how much of the tax increment that is allocated under an urban renewal plan is to be shared with the particular taxing entity based on impacts to services. And under House Bill 1348, if you can't negotiate an appropriate arrangement, there is a mediation process. And so that mediation process, the statute says you have to negotiate for 120 days. If you can't reach agreement, you mediate. I would suggest to you it's incumbent to actually try to reach an agreement. I was actually the chair of the first mediation commission under House Bill 1348. It took a year. And so if time is money, it's important to get an agreement because the time you lose in actually having to mediate is significant, especially if it's market-driven at that particular point. The other thing House Bill 1348 did is specified that if there is money remaining in the special fund, and the special fund is the fund of the Urban Renewal Authority where tax increment is deposited, if there is money remaining in the fund that has not been pledged at the end of 25 years, it has to be remitted back to the taxing entities on a pro rata basis, based on their tax, based on their mill levy. It is rare that there is money left because urban renewal is fluid, and if you talk to economists, they would suggest that retail cycles are probably, I think, less than the 25 years that the TIF clock is. But the goal is always to be remediating blight. And there is case law, there's case law in Colorado that suggests that if you certify that blight has been cured, then you can't continue to use the money that is there to eliminate blight. So it is an ongoing process to remediate blight. And then in the urban renewal context, terminology or nomenclature matters greatly. The definition of an urban renewal project is all of the things that constitute redevelopment activities. So if you were to look at the marketplace, for example, every time there is an expenditure of something by NURA, it is what's known as an undertaking or an activity. It is one component of a larger urban renewal project. And the urban renewal plan is a plan for a project. There are two methodologies for doing urban renewal. One is to do a large project area with a lot of different undertakings and activities. I would say pre-House Bill 1348, that was probably the more common type of urban renewal plan. And frankly, that's what a lot of North Glen's plans were larger project areas. Post 1348, they're often smaller. It may be a particular center, a particular group of properties. And what the statute says is urban renewal plans are the boundaries are supposed to be drawn as narrowly as feasible. But the boundaries are up to you as the city council when you're considering plans to determine what is appropriate in terms of looking at urban renewal. Taxing entities such as special districts still believe that the revenue derived from urban renewal is money that is appropriate to be shared with them. And House Bill 1348 now requires that you go through the process of negotiating. But it's important to remember that in urban renewal, those taxing entities still get the mill levy derived from the base as of the time the plan is approved. The base then grows over time with inflation and with redevelopment that is not related to redevelopment in the urban renewal area. So let's say, for example, that all of North Glen commercial property is growing at 5%. That 5% goes typically to the base. It is only the money derived from the actual redevelopment activity, the physical redevelopment activity in the urban renewal area that creates the increment that then goes to the urban renewal area to be reinvested into the urban renewal plan. And you got copies of the memo on the Arapahoe County case that was decided last year that limited, based on the property tax administrator's interpretation of TIF, that urban renewal TIF is only generated from actual physical redevelopment. But that is still a significant amount of money if the city council determines ultimately to create new urban renewal areas. And so I think as here we are 8 years after House Bill 1348, there are plenty of communities in Colorado that are using the tool. There are plenty of communities that now have urban renewal authorities that have the additional 3 members. And I think what Colorado is showing is it does work. It's a heavier lift. You've got to work with all your taxing entity partners. But if council is ultimately interested in looking at new plan areas, I would suggest to you House Bill 1348 should not be an impediment. Questions?
Yes, we do have questions. Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, City Attorney Hoffman. Can you just go back one slide? Okay, so can you give me some clarity around this? Is there like a hierarchy? Like, does project come under plan? Are they don't seem interchangeable. So can you just give me some language?
Yes, and you have a memo, for what it's worth, dated June 18th, 2024, that has a lot of the details in a confidential.
Yeah.
So, but the nomenclature is that an urban renewal plan is a plan for a project. And a project is all of the undertakings and activities that are authorized under the law. So, for example, let's take that, let's do a hypothetical that the North Glen Marketplace was, the city found that it was blighted again. Did a study, and here we are, let's say it's 2026, and there's a new plan. This discussion about the street, a very traditional undertaking or activity under an urban renewal project is public improvements. So let's say there was a desire to relocate the street, totally have a different street layout in the marketplace. That is one type of undertaking and activity that is a very core urban renewal activity, and that is a public improvement. Okay? At the same time, let's say that there was a desire to do some sort of assemblage to create a new type of business. That's another type of undertaking and activity that would be authorized. If you are looking at redevelopment activity that the market wouldn't otherwise, there was some market impediment. And so the example I often give is you could assist with a restaurant creating a grease trap, because any restaurant might need a grease trap. What might be more difficult to justify is a pizza oven, because only a pizza place can use a pizza oven. So it's more geared towards one particular business as opposed to redevelopment activity that might be, again, a restaurant for any restaurateur. There is any number of types of eligible improvements. They are all what are known as undertakings and activities, and typically urban renewal plan documents are broad, and they authorize redevelopment activity with TIF that's pledged to support that redevelopment activity. If you look at the new hospital in Wheat Ridge as you're going up I-70, that is an urban renewal project. That is supported, pledged by TIF with the Lifetime Fitness, the hospital. That whole area is an urban renewal plan area, and a good example of a larger plan area.
So, sorry, just for clarification, because I was reading the section in the memo, which you did need a password to access for the public.
Right.
So basically, like, if we wanted to have like an urban renewal plan for the city, and then we would have urban renewal projects for each individual place that would then ladder up to our plan. Like, we wanted to, right, because it's based on blight, not economic development. So we were like, okay, we want to clean up the city, make it look like 2025, right? So like modernizing architecture, something like that, right?
But you need a plan area where the blighted conditions are evaluated and exist. So it's not citywide. So that you would have and oftentimes it's the Urban Renewal Authority that says, city, you should look at Hillcrest Plaza. And then if the city council thought that was a good idea, you would do the blight study for Hillcrest Plaza, determine if the conditions exist, and that would be your plan area. And if the plan was approved, the plan is for a project. That project is all of the undertakings and activities that could be done to improve Hillcrest Plaza.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. So just for clarity in my mind, the Rural Plan 1, AKA TIF Area 1, is no longer. That expired in 2018, which specifically covers the North Glen Marketplace. So if there were other blighted areas within that marketplace that we wanted to potentially work on, we would have to establish another rural plan.
Correct. And you would go through the condition survey. that we just described to determine if blighted conditions exist. And you could identify the area you wanted to evaluate. It could be a much smaller area, it could be a larger area.
Gotcha. And it's interesting, I'm looking at the map graphic on page 15. So I see red obviously at the marketplace, but I also see red further north off of Washington. So I'm assuming those places that were away from the marketplace are also part of Ura Plan 1?
Yeah, but what's confusing in North Glen is it reflects a way of doing things pre-House Bill 1348 that are dramatically different today. And so what I mean by that is you would have large urban renewal areas and you would create within those large areas TIF areas, and the clocks would be different within each TIF area.
Okay,
Post 1348, no one does that anymore because each time you would create a new TIF area, it would be a substantial modification to the urban renewal plan, and you would have to go through the exact same process as adopting a new plan. So it is extraordinarily involved. So the practice post 1348 is one plan area, one TIF clock, but pre-1348 as reflected in North Glen, within the larger urban renewal area, multiple TIF clocks.
okay, check. Last question, if we were to establish yet another Ura plan, it sounds like we have to follow now the rules of House Bill 1348.
Yes.
So that means having special district representation.
Yeah, so if you approved a new plan or modified an existing plan, your urban renewal authority would have 4 new members. In addition to having the new plan.
So it follows then that it would be to our advantage as a city. I mean, if I'm thinking as a rational man, rational for North Glen, let's not muck around with any of our current active existing Ura plans. Because if we did, then we'd have to bring on additional members.
Whether you are mucking with your existing plans or creating a new plan, same process.
Okay.
And there are plenty of communities that if they are into, let's say, 10 or 15 years of urban renewal and nothing has happened and circumstances have changed, there may be a desire to, again, look at it anew. If you were to look at it anew and start the new 25-year clock, the base is reestablished. So, let's say there was a property that had urban renewal for 10 years and nothing happened. And everyone looked at it and said, this plan didn't reflect what needs to be done in today's environment. As long as there were no outstanding obligations from that original plan, you could look at it again. If the blight conditions exist, you start the date anew, but your base is much higher. So the property taxing entities are not losing in that context.
Gotcha, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No. Okay.
Think about.
Yeah, lots to think about, and I've definitely learned a lot while being on the NURA board. I had to look into all of this myself and do self-education, but this is definitely very helpful in knowing that that legislation could get triggered. I mean, it's likely to, I don't know, depending on what the future looks like, but knowing that you're not too worried about it, I guess, is good.
I guess my suggestion to both the city council and to NURA is if there's one takeaway, it is to not have 1348 be an impediment to urban renewal. That if, as a matter of policy, the city believes there are blighted conditions to address them. And go through the process, as opposed to saying, no, it's not feasible anymore because of 1348. I think what we have seen in the last several years for those communities that have used it is that it's collaborative with the taxing entities and plans still get approved. Urban renewal has not stopped by having those additional 4 members. Aurora, for example, is 1348 compliant. There's communities across the Front Range that are. It's become more of the norm.
Thornton as well, right?
I believe
I
so.
think so. I think so as well. And the whole purpose of the Urban Renewal Board, as you mentioned, is to remedy blight. So that has to be the number one priority. Oh, looks like we do have another hand. Councilmember Kondo.
Yes, just a
Slipping in there.
comment, Broomfield also, in fact, being a North Metro board member, one of the 5 board members, Director Law Evans, is the Borough, Broomfield Borough representative for the fire district.
And one of the unique things about Broomfield, of course, is that they are a city and county. So it is a little bit different in terms of how they do urban renewal because they don't have to go and negotiate with the county. They are the county.
They are the county. Very interesting. Okay. Well, thank you for that. That was very educational and very informative. And I believe you are presenting on our next topic, which is Protecting Opportunities and Workers' Rights Act.
Okay. Power Act. So the first question I'm going to respond is, why am I doing this presentation for all of you? And there's 2 reasons. The first is, in 2018, the city council at the time amended the handbook to make you all, as council members, subject to the policies related to harassment and the workplace of the city. So, to the extent that you're interacting with folks at the city, when we're talking about the changes in law related to harassment and the Power Act, it applies directly to you. So that's reason number 1. And reason number 2 is that, in my view, the law has changed dramatically. And so you should be aware as the legislative body in terms of what, on a day-to-day basis, the rules that the city lives by as it relates to the folks that are employed by the city, because the law has changed dramatically related to harassment. And so this presentation, and this is an abridged version, I do to elected bodies, I do to supervisors. That is a presentation I do frequently because the law has changed significantly. So really what I'm going to talk about very quickly is both federal law, which hasn't changed, and then state law, which has. So this is the definition of harassment under federal law. It's something that I think we are generally familiar with when we talk about unwelcome conduct that is based on someone being a member of a protected class. Under federal law, harassment becomes unlawful if enduring the conduct becomes a condition of continued employment or the conduct is severe or pervasive enough to create a work environment that a reasonable person would consider intimidating, hostile, or abusive. When we are evaluating the workplace environment and when we're evaluating the conduct of a supervisor, that's the standard under federal law, but I want to identify what it is not. Federal law is not intended to be what we call a civility code. What does that mean? That means that, frankly, your boss can be an ass, and that doesn't make it unlawful. It has to be harassment within the meaning of federal law that makes it unlawful. These are examples of this slide of examples of harassment under federal law. And I think these are all things that we understand would be harassment. So who's subject to harassment? And again, this is under federal law prohibitions. The harasser can be the victim supervisor, a supervisor in another department, an agent of the employee, including in North Glen, an elected official, because you've made yourself subject to those harassment policies, a coworker, and a non-employee. So I'll use myself as an example. I am not an employee of the city of North Glen. That does not give me license to violate federal law related to the harassment protections. It can be a third-party consultant. It can be anybody. The United States Supreme Court many years ago issued a decision about how the city, how conduct is attributable to the city, and any supervisor at any level that knows it is occurring is responsible. They are the city. And this case arose out of a lifeguard in Florida who was being harassed. And the fact is her supervisor knew. Because the supervisor knew, it was attributable to the city. So if a supervisor knows, it's harassment. And part of the way that should be communicated is if an employee sees something happening, to say something so that a supervisor does know. And under federal law, the victim doesn't have to be the person to whom the harassment is directed. So if I am having an offensive conversation with somebody who is all in on my offensive communications and it's overheard by someone else, I'm still guilty of harassment. It's not a civility code, and harassment does not include what are known as petty slights, annoyances, isolated minor incidents, and of course, proper discipline. And so oftentimes folks that are being disciplined will say, you're picking on me, you're harassing me. And we have to look at the underlying conduct to determine whether it is appropriate or not. Retaliation is a form of harassment. So retaliation for filing a charge of discrimination, if I exercise my right to file a charge of discrimination and then I am treated poorly, that's retaliation. That's unlawful harassment. Similarly, if I testify, if I'm a witness for someone else that was harassed, I can't be retaliated against for that or participating in an investigation. Until August of 2023, that's what we thought harassment was. In 2023, Colorado legislature passed Senate Bill 23-172. One of the primary sponsors, I think the primary sponsor was Senator Winter. And it was intended to address a gap in the law where the drafters thought federal law and state law that followed it wasn't protecting employees enough. And so, frankly, the definition of harassment under state law has changed dramatically. And here's the legislative declaration. And what it did is it identified, and I'm going to go to the second bullet point, it finds that severe or pervasive standard created by courts to determine if harassment at work is a discriminatory or an unfair employment practice does not take into account the realities of the workplace or the harm that workplace harassment causes. So really what the Power Act was doing was eliminating the severe and pervasive requirement that exists and still exists under federal law. It also added other protected classes that are not necessarily protected under federal law. It recognized marital status as a protected class under state law. And it removed the ability for an employer such as the City of North Glen to assert disability as a defense to discriminatory unemployment or employment practices. And I'm going to touch on that a little more in a sec. So the new definition of harassment, and this is the definition under Colorado law: any unwelcome physical or verbal conduct or any written, pictorial, or visual communication directed at an individual or group of individuals because of that individual or group's membership or perceived membership in a protected class, which is subjectively offensive to the individual alleging harassment and objectively offensive to a reasonable individual who is a member of the same protected class. This is really a much more liberal interpretation of the term harassment. And I'll give you an example of the membership or perceived membership in a group. Oftentimes, folks are stereotyped. Maybe they believe that because someone has an Arabic-sounding name, that they're Muslim. And so maybe someone makes a series of statements that are anti-Muslim, and that person's not Muslim. Because they are being perceived as Muslim, it is still harassment under state law. You do not have to actually be a member of the protected class. Someone thinks you are if they're trying to harass you based on that. And so in terms of removing severe or pervasive, it no longer needs to be severe or pervasive and is prohibited if the submission to the conduct or communication is explicitly or implicitly made a term or condition of the individual's employment, or submission to, objection to, or rejection of the conduct or communication is used as a basis for employment decisions, or the conduct or communication has the purpose or effect of interfering unreasonably with an individual's work performance or creating an intimidating work environment. So it really took out, the definition of harassment took out the nature or frequency, the severe or pervasive. And it's now a much broader conduct where you look at the body of work, if you will, the body of conduct that is alleged to be harassing. So, petty slights, minor annoyances are still not harassment under state law unless, under the totality of the circumstances, a reasonable person would find that to be harassment. It is both a subjective and objective test. And totality of circumstances means a lot of things. It means that it could be a single significant incident or a number of less significant incidents. So the stuff you see that you know is harassment, one incident. If you say something completely offensive to a member of a protected class, and it's combined with some impact on the workplace environment, it's going to be harassment. One significant incident. But it can also be a series of incidents that show a course of conduct. And whereas before you had to prove it was severe or pervasive, under the Power Act, you no longer need to. It also depends how many individuals are part of the conduct. If you have a group of people that are engaged in what might otherwise be considered to be minor conduct, but taken together, it's excluding a particular person or group of folks, that would be harassment under state law now. And it can change. So if I am an employee who may have crossed lines with a particular employee at one point, and that was okay, and that employee then later says, not anymore. That's not okay anymore. I have to respect that. And if I don't, that too can be harassment under the Power Act. And duration of the conduct or communication may matter if it's a series of incidents, but again, if it's one major one, doesn't matter. It's the totality of the circumstances. And there are a whole host of other bullet points that help define totality of the circumstances under the Power Act. Because this was effective in August of 2023, and cases filed after that point are still going through the process in terms of if folks are filing complaints with the state of Colorado, we really don't have a lot of guidance yet because the cases just haven't made their way through the system. And again, this is going to be under Colorado law, not federal law. But we know what the Power Act says, and that's what we have to go on until we have better guidance from state courts. And as I mentioned previously, one of the primary pieces of the Power Act legislation was marital status is now expressly protected under Colorado law. Now, this issue of disability, it makes the accommodation language under federal law more strict under state law. In other words, an employer can no longer assert that an employee's disability has a significant impact on the job as a rationale for allegedly discriminatory employment practices. Now, this exception is limited to situations where there is no reasonable accommodation that would allow the individual to satisfy the essential functions of the job. We don't know yet the impact of this language. Under federal law, when you're looking at reasonable accommodation, there are still limits to a reasonable accommodation. There are economic limitations. How that plays with the state law language on reasonable accommodation, again, we don't know yet because the cases have not yet gone through the system, but we know we have to be that much more careful when we are looking at employees with a disability and how we treat accommodations for those employees. And it limits, lastly, the defenses of an employer such as the city of North Glen for harassment by a supervisor. So the employer may only assert a defense to harassment if the employer has designed or established a program designed to prevent harassment. North Glen has that. That program is communicated to its employees. North Glen has that. And an employee unreasonably failed to take advantage of whatever the program is. And so that's why the city is always vigilant in addressing harassment. But you have to not only be vigilant, but the employees have to know you're available. And there has to be, the employee has to unreasonably have failed to take advantage of the program. Many, many years ago, employees of the city that are no longer employed were requiring under certain circumstances that complaints had to be in writing. And the question was, is that an impediment? Is that an unreasonable limitation on an employee being able to make a complaint? I would suggest under the Power Act it may be. And that you have to make yourself available. And if someone, for whatever reason, decides they don't want to put a complaint in writing and you are able to verify that the complaint is still valid, it's a good example of the type of limitation that previously may have been in place that may no longer be appropriate if what it means is that employees are don't feel comfortable in making claims. And the employer must also take prompt, reasonable actions to investigate allegations and take prompt, reasonable actions to remediate when warranted. So that's the Power Act. And it is, again, still unknown in terms of what its impact is going to be, but the impact at the level we're at is that we're that much more vigilant in making sure that if there are issues that could be harassment, that we're addressing them.
Thank you. Oh, we have some questions. Councilmember Goff.
Thank you. So Attorney Hoffman, my question is, I don't know if you want to go back to the slide on 7, I think it is, but who's subject to harassment prohibitions? And I know you said a non-employee such as yourself, but I'm curious, could it be like a resident that comes in for services and then harasses an employee?
That is a really difficult question because it's the interplay between harassment and the First Amendment. So, for example, we can't, under the First Amendment, tell a difficult resident that the city's closed for business to them. But, yes, the city is responsible for assuring that employees operate in a safe environment. And if an employee, let's say, is plowing snow, and someone says something harassing and clearly inappropriate under the Power Act, the city has the obligation to address the employee's concerns. Can the city address the residents' conduct? Not necessarily, but it can do everything it can to make the employee's workplace environment better. So in that sense, yes, how you do it is a challenge.
Okay, yeah, I was curious about that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, inquiring minds want to know. Thank you. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. 2 questions for Attorney Hoffman. And the first has to do with kind of the observation of the actions or the language. And I'm wondering, since our meetings are public meetings and they're recorded, if somebody goes back and reviews the recording and interprets a comment, maybe a comment that I make or an action that I might do as offensive, do they have a reliable basis to say I was harassed?
Highly unlikely in this context. Now, but not impossible. I mean, if someone said something, if I made a presentation and you said something overtly offensive to me that was objectively and subjectively unreasonable, perhaps. And why did I pick myself? Because I'm your employee.
That is true.
Do I think it is unlikely because of the interplay again between the First Amendment? I don't want this to be an impediment to you believing you need to speak your mind. And it is still something that is subjectively and offensively unreasonable based on someone's membership in a protected class. So in this environment, is it possible? Yeah. Is it likely? Not even close.
Okay, understand. Thank you for that. And then my second question is, it sounds like this whole reporting process, any employee could approach a supervisor. So I'm just thinking in my head, a hypothetical, if any city employee might approach us as a council member, and we may hear a grievance. So, and perhaps maybe this is an answer for the city manager, if we do receive said grievance in that situation, would it be appropriate for us? And maybe it's in that algorithm chart that we
You want to
did
address it or?
Go for it and I'll
a
supplement.
year ago or
You
18
need
months
to
ago.
reach
Do we
out to
bring it to
me.
you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of the, I mean, this is, if an employee comes to you, that is, they are not exercising the programs that are in place because you're not the place they're supposed to go. Now, if the harasser is someone that makes it so, I mean, if the city manager is the one alleged to be performing the conduct, then it may be that they feel like those places are not available to them. What the policies say is then you go to the city attorney. But if for whatever reason there is discomfort with that process, that would be the only time that I would suggest they should go to you. But that should be absolutely the exception, not the rule, because all the programs are in place through the Human Resources Department, and that's where the complaint should go.
Okay, gotcha. And I will apologize. I think I did slight anybody in the older age category earlier tonight, over the age of 40.
I forgive you.
You're forgiven.
We're in that
I'm in
protected
that too.
class.
Yeah, okay, so I just slighted myself.
And that's why I mentioned FERS. I felt like I had to bring up FERS after that.
Right, very good. You know, I am surprised that over older age is defined as over 40. I'm like, who came up with that? Anyway,
Well, and for what it's worth, on a discrimination case, part of the case involving age is, so for example, if someone is terminated who's over 40, but the person that's hired is also over 40, likely not a claim of discrimination based on age. It's if the person who they're replaced is not a member of that same protected class.
gotcha, thank you. I feel older as a result of this presentation.
I apologize for that.
Thank you. You're forgiven.
That's a great question, though. So go to the city manager first. Good lesson. I don't have any other questions. I don't see that anyone has any other questions. So thank you so much, City Attorney Hoffman, for that. It's clear as mud in some of it, but I'm glad I'm not a lawyer. And thank you for all of that. So just be a good person, and you should avoid all these situations. Thank you. Are there any other items for City Council tonight? No? Hearing none, I will adjourn the study session. We will now move into a special meeting. I will now call to order the special City Council meeting of July 15th, 2024. Joanna, City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Lighty is absent. Mayor Pro Tem Luke Manjaro-Massa.
Here.
Councilmember Burns. Here. Councilmember Jaramillo is absent. Councilmember Kondo.
Here.
Councilmember Roper.
Here.
Councilmember Goff.
Here.
Councilmember Nowicki is absent. And Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will now entertain a motion that the city hold an executive session to consider legal consultation and advice pursuant to Section 4.5D of the City of Northland Home Rule Charter regarding potential legislation applicable to the city department directors.
Motion is so stated.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Please vote.
I will close that vote, and the motion to meet in executive session passes unanimously.
Great. I guess take a short break.
Yeah,
Break on everything.
original breakdown.